After 2 years of remote work and economic pressure, local leaders all over the country are now rethinking the shape and scope of their city centers. To close out our program today, I am pleased to welcome Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. The mayor announced her D.C. comeback plan designed to boost the population of D.C., revitalize downtown, and increase equity. For this conversation, I'm happy to be joined by D.C. News Now anchor Chris Flanagan. Glad you can join us, both of us, both of you. Mayor Bowser, let me first start with the bipartisan infrastructure law. What does it mean for D.C. and where are we in the implementation of it?
Well, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for D.C. It's a big deal for our nation. It allows us to catch up on aging infrastructures, bridges, airports. For us, we have a real focus on how we're going to use those dollars, $3 billion coming directly through the formulas, and even more possible through competitive grants. So we're very focused on it. I established a task force. It was led by former Secretary Slater, Secretary of Transportation Slater, and a businesswoman in D.C. To really help us focus on what would make a difference for our residents and our competitiveness, quite frankly. And so we have a set of recommendations. We're putting a team in place also to be ready for the competitive process to go after those grants.
Mayor Bowser, you're the chair here at the Mayor's Conference, International Affairs Committee. What role does a mayor play in international issues, and what can you learn from it to implement here in D.C.?
Well, that's a great question. We had the opportunity yesterday to sit down with Secretary Blinken. We've had at the U.S. Conference and International Affairs Committee for some time. And I recognized early on as a mayor, I've been mayor just starting my third term, so I've been mayor 8 years. And I knew when I started that D.C. really had to be on the global map. And I was concerned that we weren't. And how did we strengthen our relationships with other capital cities in the world? Unexpectedly, I think also we were the face of Washington, D.C. in the world, American values, American democracy, and it was really our pleasure to go around. But we also have economic focus on our missions around the world. So how do we attract foreign investment, whether it's in big economic development projects, the transformation of downtown, sports teams in D.C. or other places. So that's been an important part of our missions, but it's also a cultural exchange. I was very proud to lead the first ever mission to El Salvador, for example. You might say, why are you going to El Salvador? Well, our #1 immigrant population in Washington, D.C. is from El Salvador. Our second largest is from Ethiopia. So we also led a mission to Ethiopia. So our missions are economic and also cultural in exchange.
Mayor Bowser, obviously gun violence is a big topic here and a big concern, of course, in D.C. Karan Blake, the 13-year-old boy from Brookland, was shot and killed recently. Will the police be releasing body camera footage, and do you think they should be releasing it?
No, they won't be releasing it because the investigation is ongoing, and it is important that the police and prosecutors have an opportunity to make that investigation happen. And in the administration of justice, it's important that it continue that way.
Do you think an arrest will be made soon? There's a lot of...
I have no idea, but I know that whatever the facts suggest and whatever the grand jury says, which I believe this will go to a grand jury, that's what will happen.
D.C. statehood, you pushed for it very hard, and in the last Congress, we had Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and of course, President Biden in the White House. It passed the House, but it didn't pass the Senate. Now we have divided government. Do you think this can happen, perhaps maybe in 2025, because the House and Senate will be up for grabs, and Democrats could control everything? And how disappointed were you that it didn't get through the Senate and they eradicated the filibuster?
Well, they didn't eradicate the filibuster.
No, they didn't.
If they had eradicated the filibuster, it could have happened.
Do you think you would have had the votes if they had done that?
Yes,
okay.
Because it would have taken a simple majority.
Yep.
And that's how most things work in a democracy. The majority rules. And we believe we could have definitely gotten to the majority in the Senate. having to get to 60 votes is a hurdle, not just for DC statehood, for voting rights, for common sense gun regulation, for everything that will make our nation work better. So it's important that we get there. Our argument was that there should be a carve out to the filibuster for democracy issues. How do we protect the ballot? How do we ensure that every person gets, there's one person, one vote? And right now in Washington, D.C., people, Americans that pay taxes just like everybody else, who are just like everybody else, literally don't have a vote in their Congress. And it's un-American.
Mayor Bowser, 16 kids were killed last year, young kids in D.C. A lot of people tell us they're angry, they're tired, they're upset, they're heartbroken, of course. I know you've called it an emergency, you've thrown everything at it, you reportedly. How come it's not working? What can be done differently to bring this emergency
Well, I don't think it would be correct to say it's not working because last year alone we saw a 14% decrease in our homicide numbers over the previous year. We saw an overall decrease in violent crime. I hesitate to say that because we're not satisfied with it. Nobody can be satisfied with 16 children who were killed, and sadly, they were likely killed by other children in many of those cases. So we know that we have to get to young people who are committing more dangerous crimes at younger ages, and we have seen that trend post-pandemic. And so, how do we get to young people that are really in trouble? And we're focused with that in the schools. I had a meeting last week, a week and a half ago, with school principals from all of our secondary schools, so middle school principals and high school principals, about how they were working with us in a whole of government approach to identify kids in need and to better support them, because oftentimes they're our first sign that a kid's in trouble or a family needs more.
Where you said the numbers are going down, are you worried about the perception, though, that D.C. is a violent city? That's kind of what people are scared.
People are scared all across America. Our cities and our towns are flooded with guns, and as long as we accept that as a way of life in our country, we're going to have experiences with gun violence. We had a child go into a school and shoot a teacher. We had a child, not in D.C., but we had a child get off the bus, 2 children get off a bus and were shot in a crossfire of people fighting with each other. And these are problems of guns. And we know if we had fewer guns, illegal guns and legal guns, we would be a safer city.
COVID-19 was devastating across the globe, and especially in D.C. Where are we now? I know you've
not especially in D.C.
Well, it's been a problem as far as businesses closing. We've seen it. But where are we now? And how do you have a D.C. comeback plan?
Yes. Well, I just want to be clear that our residents and businesses stood together shoulder to shoulder to do what we needed to do to crush that virus. And that's what they did. They got vaccinated. They got tested. We stood up one of the best, in my opinion, testing programs anywhere in the country so that our citizens would be safe. But we also know that a lot of our people immediately started teleworking, which I think kept our city safe. And the federal government, as one of our major employers, continues to have a very robust telework plan. So we know to have a vibrant downtown in Washington and New York in San Francisco, wherever you go, we need a mix of daytime traffic. So we're focused on, of course, getting most of our workers most of the time back in their offices, because we believe that's what people come to Washington to do, to work on big issues, to solve the world's problems. And we know they do it better when they can collaborate. But we also are challenged to get a better mix of space in our downtown. We see even examples in D.C. Of commercial areas that fared better during the pandemic where there were more people already living there. So in a downtown, let's face it, that was built on the LaFont plan, okay? And the LaFont plan has wide avenues in big, majestic federal buildings. So what are we going to do to remake those spaces so that more people can live in downtown, or those buildings that may not ever be fully occupied again by workers have a different use? And that's our focus right now.
I know you've pressed the White House,
Yeah.
In your comeback plan to get workers back downtown, federal workers. How is that going? Are you getting pushback? Is that going to work?
It's not clear to me, and this is our approach. We don't have our heads in the sand. We don't think that the way of work is going to be exactly the same as it was before the pandemic. But we also don't think that we should have a decentralized telework policy for our federal government, because I would challenge people to tell us how we're as productive. What we see right now is every agency, every secretary basically can decide how their workers are coming to work. And we think, and we heard the president say in his State of the Union, and I hope that he will address it again, that we have done what we need to do in this country to manage this virus, to get people vaccinated, and it's safe to go back to work. And lead by example by having a federal centralized policy that makes sense.
Last question. You clashed with former President Trump a lot. What do you think the chances are that he can come back and get back in the White House?
You know, I didn't think he could win the first time. Mm-hmm. So I have learned to not trust my instinct on that primary.
Well, you had a lot of company in that one.
Right. So I have to watch how that primary plays out. But in all seriousness, I hope that people who love our country and love democracy, respect the rule of law, and respect the ballot box are victorious on the Republican side.
We have run out of time, and that brings us to the end of our program. A big thank you to all of our mayors and to Chris for joining me. We also want to thank all of you for watching. For any of those who missed any of these conversations, we will have this video from the event up shortly on our website, thehill.com. I'm Bob Cusack. Hope you enjoyed the program. Have a great day.